Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Getting it set up here. Let me get my stretch timer going. Beautiful. Hello, marshmallow bears. Welcome in, get comfy. We are just about ready to get going here. Gonna prime all of my barouches. Then we're gonna get to unboxing this this gouache, this jelly gouache, for the very first time. It is not, as far as I know, the Himi, I think is the one everyone talks about. It's very similar looking. They both come in these lovely sort of blue-green boxes, but this is an Artex brand. It's got a card with the swatches on it here. We'll see if that holds up. I'm gonna crack open. According to reviews on the internet, they are virtually indistinguishable, both in terms of the paint and the packaging. So let's see what we got. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Lots of little jelly cups here. Ooh, am I gonna have to tip these out? Ooh, it's heavy. Wow, this is like way heavier than I thought it was gonna be. Huh. It doesn't look like there's any color indications on here. There's codes, which I'm sure correspond to the pigment values. But I guess I'll just drop it all out. Okay. So it has little cup containers. I can use this as an ice cube tray if this paint doesn't work out. So let's go ahead and sort out all of these little cups, all these little jellies. It does look yummy. So each one of these cups is 30 milliliters. That's a lot of paint. Oh, I'm gonna absolutely make so much mess opening up this. Okay, so I need a place where I can put lids. I need to keep things clean in here or I will die. Okay. I'm gonna put all the lids up here so that they can be nice and clean. So I've got black, I've got white. It looks like there's 2 whites included. Let's see. Titanium white and just white. I don't know what that means. Because usually you need a base for a white paint. So it might be zinc. It looks like, not mayonnaise, sour cream. Kind of the appearance. Okay, what now? I get to decide what order I want all these colors to be presented in. I want the whites and the black right here next to each other so that I can tint things as I go. I want the greens together. I'm pretty much just going to build it out like I would a palette. I'm going to place my greens together over here with my blues. Oh, the consistency is so weird. I can't get over it. I've been trying to use zinc a little bit less lately because I've seen... Oh, look at this weird bubble. Gross. I've seen some reports that over time, zinc can destroy colors, sort of from the inside out. So it's not very light fast, which is not great. But that's like over very, very, very long periods of time, of course. It would be referred to as non-archival. So I've got my greens, my blues, my purples. I'm going to put my reds on the other side, my warms. I basically want to separate this into a warm, cool palette. Jafamo, thank you so much for raiding with 22 people. Hello, raiders. Welcome in. Hope you're all doing well. Make yourselves comfortable. I am currently unboxing for the very first time some jelly gouache, which I've never used before. For as much as I've used gouache, I would say it's my most used painting medium at this point. I've never used jelly type. This one just is straight up chocolate pudding. I mean, come on. Look at that. I'm putting my earth tones in the middle. I've got this sort of sienna, like a raw sienna. And the oranges will build out to the reds. I'll put this red here, and then I've got ochres. This ochre looks like honey mustard. Second paper towel just to wipe down my thumb here. And this one looks like nacho cheese. We have to pick a different food for each one of these. And then we've got orange. It's more of like a coral. Got a nice violet and a bright lemon yellow for our final cup. That's just straight up prepared mustard. Okay, so those are all of our sauces. It's very heavy, so that I've heard people say that about these jelly gouaches before. The density makes the package incredibly heavy, and that's very true. I probably wouldn't travel with this. I wouldn't take this on excursions. All right, so I've got my sketchbook ready to go. I'm going to flip to a new page. And we're going to do a little painting and see just what in the heck paint's all about. So, for reference, this painting was done with my Winsor & Newton Classic Standard. And now on this new page, we'll do a piece just with the jelly gouache. I'm going to go ahead and tamp this side down. I'm going to get my good clamp on this page. Give it a nice firm clampage. Grab a nice earth tone pencil. And then I'm going to go through my phone and find a good photograph. And we're going to pick something out from one of my recent excursions and do a study. For For those of you who were here on yesterday's stream, when I was working on the beginning of my new Zelda print piece, I posted it. It's on Twitter now. But if you don't Twitter, this is kind of how it looked at the end of the last stream. It's a little hard to see, but sort of Link looking off into the distance. I'm really happy with how the final piece came out. I added some monsters in there and some points of interest and things like that. So I'm going to head back to the photos that I took when I was walking through the marsh, the local marsh nearby. I have one idea in particular that I would like to capture, so I'm going to put that into the Discord. Exclamation Discord in the chat. Thank you, Lyra. If you would like to go to the art references channel in there, where I post all of my art references when I paint on stream. And I'm going to slam that in there, so if you'd like to see what I'm working from as I paint this piece, then just go ahead and hop right on over there. Boop. And ahoy. So I'm sending it in there now. It is sent. So the piece that I'll be doing is a little capture of a little bird hanging out on an old, dead, very gnarly looking tree, which I love. There's a lot of those in the swamp. There's these old sort of gnarled ancient trees poking up out of the new growth. And I love to see them. So I myself am going to go into the Discord right now so that I can pull that up on my computer. All right. Beautiful. So we're going to have to condense the composition, and this is, it can be a very tricky thing to do, is to look at a picture that is vertical in orientation and then try to figure out a good crop for it. Now, beautifully, we've got little computers in our pockets at all times now that can do the crop for us. So I could go back in, I could re-edit this to do a little bit of a crop, and I might do that just to speed things along, but you can also just observe and try and figure out, based on things like the rule of thirds and the horizon line and the points of interest, where you would actually like to center the focus of the painting, and then just work out from there, from sort of the central area. But since I've already got this picture up on my phone, I'm going to give it a quick crop. I want to include at least the horizon line, the back trees, sort of the foreground trees that have a darker, deeper value, and then of course our little bird friend. So now I'll put that in art references as well, just so you can see the comparison between the original reference and then kind of what I see when I want to paint from that reference. Now, I don't know how these work out of the tubs. I assume that I can just pull them over and then put them on the palette. So let me grab... I've got here my palette knife. So I'm going to actually take the colors from the tubes. I'm not going to dip my brush directly in. And we'll see how that works out for the longevity of the paint. Because usually I like to squeeze the paint out of the tubes onto my palette and work that way. Again, this would make it difficult if I was trying to do like plein air and not wanting to travel with just the whole thing. If I created a small wet box, so just a sealed container that has some damp paper towel in it, then you could put the little blobs of paint on that and they would stay moist for longer, and then you could work from those. But as I have the studio right here, we're good to go. So the first thing I want to do now that I have my reference established is just do a quick little sketch. I'm going to open up the ref. And just like before, I'm going to spill over onto this side if I so choose. Hey, Pachi, how's it going? So the tree is the most important thing, and the burb, who I would like to be pretty centrally located. There's our bird. And I love how dynamic and curving these trees are. Of gnarled and sweeping. And then behind the tree, we have that horizon, distant hills, and then this sort of big area of trees going up like this. Okay, pretty much it for the sketch, and now we can dip into gathering up a few bespoke colors here. So for the sky, I want to grab some of this bright blue, grab that. Ooh, that's way more than I would normally squeeze out of a tube. But I also don't know how dense these paints are. White. We'll get some green. And some red to counterbalance the green. Next to each other on there. We'll get some earth tone. Put that next to the blue for dark value. And some yellow. Then we can kind of dip into whatever else we need as we go, I think. That's going to be the main assortment. So let's see how these paints perform. Before I do that, I need to remember to actually Twitter streaming. Got to do that earlier. I just put a bunch of blue paint all over my phone. It's fun. I would say so far the jelly paints are significantly messier. Just because you kind of have to interact with an open surface of paint. And that's always going to be a little messy no matter what you try to do. I wonder how well it would work if you had a separate, like, not using this, because this container doesn't seem very airtight, which I assume is why a lot of them dry out and you expect them to. But what if you use like an airtight or a wet palette to store these paints? Do you think that they would hold a little bit better? Or even, I would posit, if you put a damp paper towel over top and then put the lid on? Yeah, they would need to be pretty much airtight if we wanted to not have them turn moldy. Well, let's see how these... I'm very curious about the texture. That's the thing I'm the most curious about, and also the thinning properties. This feels like gouache. Feels like gouache. Presumably there is a difference between the two whites. I'm not quite sure myself yet. This is my first time trying these out. One of them is listed as titanium white. The other is listed as white. So I would have to assume it either has zinc or some other base, but they don't tell you what the base of it is, unlike most paint that I use. Okay, let's put down some nice clean water. Hello, hello, welcome to the stream. Okay, get the surface nice and wet. Interesting. I thought it would go on a little bit thicker. Yeah, just normal water for the surface. Just to make sure that everything kind of blends down when I hold it at an angle here. This is just the general technique that I use with my Winsor & Newton stuff. Of paper towel. We'll see how some of my basic techniques work on this set here. We're trying Jelly Gouache for the very first time. Very excited about. I'm gonna grab a little bit of this purple pink color. Now, with the sky color still on my brush, I'm going to dive into the greens for the background. Is there a dark green? I already said I wouldn't dip, but here I am. You put all those colors at my disposal. All right, let's get a base layer on for those distant mountains. We go across like that. The consistency is strange. I'm not used to it, but I don't hate it. Yes, indeed. I definitely have tried poster color. I've got 2 sets here of the Knicker brand poster color. I was actually wondering if these would have a similar feel to a poster color because those come out of the jar and they feel like a gel, and that's what I assumed these would feel like, but these are definitely different. These feel more watery, and I thought that they'd be more akin to the poster color feels like chocolate pudding, like a snack pack when it comes out of the jar. This does not feel like that. This is much looser. Okay, now we have to boost into a more yellow direction with these mid-ground trees. Also, I can kind of feel these... Oh, we've got our first stretch break. I'm going to finish this thought, and then we'll do our stretch. These definitely have more visible pigment floating inside, which is interesting. I wasn't expecting that. You can actually see the little particles of pigment mixing when you're putting them together on the palette. But the liquid consistency is actually pretty nice for blending, I have to say. I need to put these down before the paper dries, so I'm actually ignoring my first stretch alarm of the day. Get it all down, and then I can take as long as I need to. It can be a sign of bad quality paint, but also not necessarily. I mean, it's just the consistency is weird. It's different than what I'm used to. I would say a lot of inferior, like early starter grade paint. The main thing is chalkiness. Like, the chalkiness is a thing you always have to watch out for, because that means the pigment is like separating, especially on the page. And it's not gonna do you any favors. You'll have to fight against it the whole way to get any blending. You might find yourself very frustrated. Okay, that should be good enough that I can let it sit for a minute, and let's stretch. I'll reset my timer here. Yeah, I'd say that for the price, this is really kind of blowing me away, honestly. Now we'll see, because the main thing with beginner paint is great for practice, worse in the long term. So it has like lower light fastness, stuff that like you don't really care about when you're doing sketches, right? And that's an important thing to remember. It's like cheap doesn't mean bad. Cheap just means beginner and learning, and that's just as important as professional, in my opinion anyway. Because otherwise, what are you going to learn on, right? If you expect students to break the bank, then that's a failing equation in my book. These are really good for layering. something that I'm currently learning about these paint. Like, really good. But I also think it's because that's how they are straight out of the jelly. And if they don't keep their jelly consistency, then I'm not 100% sure. Now, of course, I can't say this is my first day ever using these. But I wonder how they feel when they're in cake form. That's a very valid form of watercolor, certainly. They re-wet pretty well? That's good to know. I'm very curious to see, like, a few weeks, months time. I'll definitely crack these out again and do some more experimenting with them. I'm very curious to see how they hold up over time. Okay, so I'm not going to go too much darker on these mid-ground trees because there is actually a bush that's right here that's actually in front. So for those, I need the darkest colors, but I also need this to dry completely before we even attempt to do that. So I'm going to work on the tree and our crow friend. Let's go in with a deep... Actually, no, let's start with a bright color first. We'll do a bright tone. We'll just go in really, really bright first. And then we'll darken around. For the most part, they layer and they maintain transparency, just like my regular gouache does. They seem to dry okay. The number one thing you notice about poster colors when you use gouache a lot, and for those who are curious about how poster colors feel, they feel very different, and also, here's the biggest difference. From when you put the paint down to when it dries, there is barely any, because there's always some, but there's barely any color shift, which is way different from gouache. Gouache paint, you're putting down that paint, you know it's going to shift, and you factor that into the painting. The light stuff will dry darker, and darker stuff will dry lighter, and you just have to know that going in. But with the poster color, you put that down, and it is pretty much color for color, which is really wild. It's the only paint I've ever used that I've had that experience with. It's a great question, Schmuckle, and I'm not sure, honestly. Like, I don't know the chemistry of poster color. It's a huge mystery to me. The only things that I know for sure about poster color is bad light fastness, because they're not meant to be, like, displayed in light environments for prolonged periods of time. They're not made for gallery exhibitions, even though they're beautiful pieces. They're mostly made for production. So they're made to be photographed and then stuck in a dark, cool place for the rest of their lifetime, essentially. And that's how it is in most animation houses, or was, I guess, in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, when these things were mostly being used. They would be photographed for principal photography, and then they would be shoved into a drawer, later to be sold to art collectors down the line when, you know, anime and things like that took off. Yeah, it's a mood, right? Big mood. Okay, so once this dries a little bit more, I can start putting some darker colors on here. So I'm going to grab some of this. I assume this is ultramarine. Oh, maybe it's Prussian, actually. I have Prussian, I have lake blue. When you mix some amount of water in, they blend in a strange way, and it's hard to describe. Maybe it's kind of poster color-esque, but it feels like the molecular structure of it. I don't know what they use to bind the jelly gouache. Do they use raspberry preserves? Because it seems to... it loosens up in a strange way that I'm not used to. I'm marking in some of the darkest areas here. So we'll have the absolute lightest and the absolute darkest portions, and then we'll fill in with midtones across the rest of the structure here. Include some more warm color. I need these shadows to be nice and bold. I might go smaller brush sections. So as the paint brush gets drier here, I'm just using whatever's left on the brush itself to create some sort of dry brush effects. And that will sort of lend us a nice bark texture. Forbidden Jello is strange. It's very, very interesting to use. And again, I'm not sure how it's going to feel in a month, 2 months' time. I think that's the thing I'm most curious about, because everyone talks about it drying out. And I would really like to know how it feels to reactivate. But so far, it's good to blend. Goes down smooth, dries as fast as regular gouache. All systems nominal so far. Yeah, we will definitely be revisiting the jelly gouache. First of all, because it would be a shame to open this up and then never use it again. Don't let the finger paints hear me say that. It's gouache, but thick, kind of. Like, if you squeezed out... First of all, it would be so expensive. But if you squeezed out this amount for Winsor & Newton, like if you just had a giant 30 ml tube of Winsor & Newton and you filled up all of these things, I don't think it would be the same consistency. In fact, I think it would be thicker. This looks thicker than my regular gouache. It's not, though. When you actually stick a brush into it, it's not that thick. It's actually, it's kind of like whipped. You know when you whip up like a mousse kind of thing? It's light like that. It's heavy, but it's not as dense. Yeah, my 30, well, what do I use? My big tubes of gouache are my white and my black. Okay, so here is my tube of permanent white. It's a 37 milliliter tube. Very big. Well, it's not big anymore because, you know, I use it all the time. But, so this is only slightly bigger than one of these containers. Like one of these whites up here. But if you squeezed out all of that into one of those, it would be way thicker. I kind of like it. I like the way that it feels. I think it's mostly because I'm using a lot of it, and I probably will honestly continue to use just a lot of it every time I paint with it, because there's just so much to use here. It's very easy, at least in this current jelly form, to just sloop in and grab a bunch and just go kind of thick with it. It thins out okay. I used it for the backing wash. You can see it was a little streaky. I didn't do a great application, to be fair. But even with tipping it, it didn't seem to blend into itself. It kind of just moved around. The set that I got the, and again, this isn't Hemi, this is R-Tex. As far as I can tell, they're the same. It might be one of those things where like different brand names, same factory. There's a lot of products like that, honestly, on the market. This cost me 35 Canadian, which is, I don't know, 29 American, something like that. Which is, to put it in perspective, hey, you want some perspective? I bought a single tube, 14 milliliters of Cobalt Turquoise Light to replace my Cobalt Turquoise Light. Let me just hold it up so you can get a taste. This is a 14 milliliter tube of gouache paint. I bought a Cobalt Turquoise Light tube, which is about half of one of these cups. 27 Canadian. So one tube of cobalt turquoise light almost costs as much as this entire thing. Now, I will say, because these things are important to note, shipping is different everywhere. Availability is definitely different everywhere, and that's very important to know. Cobalt turquoise light is also a specialty color. It's not a primary. You can buy the primary Winsor Newton colors much cheaper. It depends on where you live. Sometimes you get lucky and you live in a place that has access to a ton of paint. Sometimes you're like me and you live in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes you might live in a place that can't get paint at all. So it's very tricky. Now this area here is fully dry, so I'm gonna start putting in that dark bush, and we're gonna do the ultimate test of gouache. For me, this is as ultimate as it gets. I'm gonna do the Studio Ghibli test. Now, the main trick of this test is to lay down a very dark, this is what they do with poster color for animation. Lay down a really, really, really dark undertone for this bush here. We're going to wait till that fully dries completely. Might use the hair dryer just to speed things up a little later if it's not fully dry by the time I'm done fiddling over here. And then laying a light tone over top and it keeping its opacity. If it can do that, then it's very strong. I find one of the first things to go when you use a cheaper gouache is the transparency or the opacity. Because you need a lot of pigment to be opaque. I've got paint all over my hands. Okay, now I'm going to do the trees over on this side. To actually clean the palette. Ooh, time for another stretch break. Water control is the secret hardest part of all water-based media. And I think the reason why it's not talked about more in art courses is honestly because it's such a hands-on thing. Like, it's not something you can be taught. It's impossible. Because it's not like... It's not brain knowledge, it's hand knowledge, right? I will say, if the paint just stayed like this, like, I know it won't, but if it stayed in this jelly consistency, honestly, I would really like it for a lot of finishing applications, detail work and stuff like that, because it just goes on real smooth, glides around. You don't have to worry too much about the mixing. But since I know that it'll dry, it's a opposition. What do I think about the provided color selection? So the colors that they include in the package for this set. And I think this is, yeah, this must be the 18 set. 3 by 6, yeah. So there's 18 colors in here. It's definitely as much as I would ever need. It's a little bit more than I usually need for my setup. When I travel, if I do plein air outside, I only really take the primaries. I make sure to take at least a warm and a cool, black and a white, and then something to tint those off if I need to. Absolutely need to. But I like to travel light in those instances. In the studio, it's generally primaries, black and white, and then specialty colors like opera rose or cobalt turquoise light, things like that. And I always have my earth tones on hand as well. So this set honestly pretty much covers everything I would need normally, except for the really eccentric colors. You know, the opera rose, which you could maybe... No, you couldn't really tint up to it even. There's a magenta here, a bright magenta. If you mix that with white, you might be able to get a nice bright pink, but it wouldn't quite be the right tint. Also, I like to mix opera rose into other colors, and if you've already tinted it with white, that can sometimes be a bit of a losing proposition. But overall, I'd say, yeah, I enjoy this selection of colors. Let me get my stretching guy. Sorry, I wish I had an automatic thing that did that for me because my brain isn't good, but here we are. All right, so now that I've sort of worked over here for a bit, this area is getting drier. I can still see a bit of a shine on it, so we're not going to do the ultimate Ghibli test over there just yet. So I'm going to put in all of the little branches then. I'm going to be going back to the rigging brush for this. Make sure I've got lots of water. And I'm just going to mix down with dark brown and blue. I should honestly be using the ultramarine for this mixture. That's the best way to really gray it out. And then boop. It is nice being able to just bloop in and grab some pigment. Make sure it's nice and loose. Okay. So the main branches that we have in this piece are over here. Terminates right here. I think gouache can be a very beginner-friendly medium. I know a lot of people that struggle with gouache the most in my sort of colleague life are the people that come from other mediums, oils, acrylics, watercolor especially. Because watercolor and gouache are so similar, it can sometimes be a bit of a stumbling block for people that come over expecting them to act exactly the same. But for me, gouache is just so versatile, you know? It's something I can just throw in a bag and walk out into the middle of a field and start painting immediately with not a lot of prep or setup. You just need water, sometimes paper towels if you don't want to make too much of a mess, and then a sketchbook and some brushes. And because of that, I enjoy it the most, especially when I was traveling often before, you know, everything. It was great to just chuck in a bag and take on a flight without needing to worry about anything else. Yeah, I would say if you're looking to just get started on some gouache, this is honestly pretty nice so far. This is very early times, of course. I don't know how this looks in the long term. Like, I'm not going to be necessarily selling any of these jelly gouache paintings just yet, but I'm going to do a little bit more reading about light fastness and things like that. But for learning, kind of hard to beat this price, honestly. Especially compared to Winsor & Newton designer gouache, which is what I normally use. That stuff is quite a bit more expensive. It's hard not to use a lot of gouache with this set. I'm noticing, like, it's just hard not to grab a lot when you're going in. And it's not necessarily that I need a ton, but there's not a lot of moderation. I used to use way too much with my Winsor & Newton set as well. It was a real sticking point for me. But sadly it goes hand in hand with the whole learning how much water to use. Those things are very much connected. Especially once you paint, you get a few dozen paintings under your belt and you're like, you know what? I don't really use as much yellow ochre as I'm always putting down here, so I'm not going to give as much. And then it's not a problem, because if you need more, just squeeze a little bit more out. But if you don't, then, you can give yourself some imaginary points. Yeah, that's a thing I really love about gouache, honestly. One of my favorite things is the versatility. You can thin it out and make it like watercolor with beautiful washes, or you can use it more thickly like acrylic. And the choice is yours. Hey, Lion. Yeah, I definitely know how that goes with the local art store thing. We don't have many options around here. And it's a bummer. There's a lot of people... I know for a fact there's a lot of people near me that want to paint. But they just can't... They don't have the resources for it. And there's a Michael's nearby, but they mostly have craft stuff and not necessarily art supplies. That would be really good for, like, getting fundamentals and stuff. Bit of a bummer. DL, thank you so much for gifting those 5 subs to the community. I appreciate that. Hey, Redbird. Lion, thank you for gifting those 5 subs. You're gonna start a hype train if you're not careful. I gotta say, I'm really enjoying the layering that I can get with this paint. And I think it's just because I'm using so much paint. I'm using more than I would normally use with my Winsor & Newton set. And it's just really, it's making everything pop in quite an exciting way. Lion, thank you for the bits. Yeah, that's true. The amount of paint you get is pretty wild with this set. Okay, so I think enough time has passed that this side over here is pretty dry. TL, thank you so much for 8 months. 8 months? You're 1 month away from being a cow bear. Ooh, that's good to hear. That it dries matte. I definitely, that's my preferred sort of thing, just because I'm so used to gouache at this point. And also the poster color dries to a very smooth matte finish. Almost like a satin matte finish, actually, which is very interesting. It has a completely different texture than regular gouache. Matt 2D, I barely knew about this jelly stuff. I had seen YouTube videos. I knew that it was like popular online, but I was so in my own world of the Winsor & Newton stuff that I never really thought about getting it. I mean, I already had all the supplies that I needed. And then enough people were talking about it that I was like, you know what? I only ever use this stuff on stream, and so I can't really speak with experience to anything else. So I honestly should try a few different alternatives, especially beginner-friendly and student-grade alternatives. I think it would be good to have that knowledge base, just so if anyone asks in the future, I can say, yeah, like that works pretty good. Okay, now that I've cleared a little spot on my palette, I'm gonna mix up a nice bright green. That's very true, Brandy. Yes, they do use those in the Studio Ghibli works. One of my first big painting inspirations were the works of Kazuo Oga, who did a lot of the earlier features for Ghibli, including my favorite movie of all time, Princess Mononoke. Well, hello there, Reaper Miniatures. How y'all doing? Welcome in, Raiders. I hope you're all doing well. Make yourselves comfy. I'm trying out a new medium today. Well, kind of new. I'm an old hand at gouache, but I'm trying out them jelly gouaches that are so popular on the internet right now. I'm trying it for the first time and seeing how it feels. So far, pretty good. Let's get some more colors going down here. When you're working on sort of textural leaves in areas like this, it's pretty important to vary up the color as much as you can because there's so many sort of refractive elements, light shining off of other things. Oh dang, Limebite, did you recruit? So the main difference between the gouache and the jelly gouache so far that I can tell, I mean, again, it's my very first time using it, but compared to what I usually use, the consistency is definitely different. There's some kind of medium that they're using inside this paint that helps it stay wet a little bit longer. I hear that it dries relatively fast if left uncovered. I'm very curious to see what it's like in a month or so time. I'm definitely going to be getting it out again and giving it a shot because I'm very curious to see what it's like when it's dry, using it sort of in cake form. So far, it's definitely passing the opacity test. It's more or less as opaque as the regular gouache that I use, which is to say you can get a pretty good coverage if you apply it with not much water, which I think is one of the things that will be sort of missing once the paint dries out a bit. But also is not vital. So when I do these paintings, when I normally work with my Winsor & Newton set, I mix on mixing paper, which is like fancy wax paper. And when I'm done a painting, I set that piece of paper aside. The paint will dry up. But then when I work on my next painting, if I'm doing something off stream or more sketching or whatever, I just like spritz it with a little bit of water. And it doesn't fully come back to life. It depends on which pigment, actually. Some of them turn into absolute stones. Some of them are a little bit more malleable. But I'm no stranger to using dry paint or caked up paint. So I'll be very curious to see what it's like to have just an entire set of permanently caked out paint. Just started using gouache as a medium. Can you give me some advice regarding what brushes are the best? Yes, I can. Generally speaking, the best stuff for gouache is usually the best stuff for watercolor. So I would recommend things like soft brushes. I use mostly synthetics. I use the Jack Richardson travel set. You don't have to specifically get this brand or anything. I'm just giving an example of a really good brush that I use is this synthetic. It's a synthetic flat, and flats are great because you can get big washes of color, but you can also turn it on its corner and get tiny little dots of detail. So I think this is a pretty essential piece of kit I like the synthetics because they snap right back to position, and they hold their shape really, really well. So it's great if you want to do any kind of detail work or even larger washes. I also have more naturalistic brushes, softer. This is like a fully watercolor brush right here. I use this one mostly these days for applying washes of water before I like paint a sky, for example. But if I'm doing a larger painting, I will just use that brush as a paintbrush. And then I have this calligraphy brush, which is slightly unorthodox, but I really, really like the control it gives me. It's a natural hair. It's a dual hair brush. Inside the core of it, I think, is horsehair, and then it's surrounded by a softer mammal hair. And this is, I think, it's one of the few natural hair brushes I own and use, and it's absolutely fantastic because, unlike the synthetics, it will not snap back automatically to its shape. It will eventually get back to where it needs to go, but you can bend it and move it and manipulate it so that you can get all these like fun little shapes like this and get little textural effects. Which I really, really love to do. And those are the main brushes that I would recommend using. For the most part, I haven't had any trouble with the long-term care of my brushes. I've been using these for a few years now. And just regular soap and water. I once heard the advice of anything you would use on your hair, you can use on your natural hair brushes. I feel like that's a little overkill, mostly because I don't want to buy expensive shampoo and conditioner for my brushes. But yeah, I just basically use regular soap and water. I go gentle. Make sure not to tug, especially on these natural hair brushes, Japanese brushes, when they're submerged, because you can weaken the glue and then you'll just start plucking hair out of it, and it's kind of a nasty scene. So just kind of dotting around and picking different colors as I go here. Lightening and darkening. Yeah, make sure to get the dandruff control shampoo for your natural brushes. You're very welcome. Okay, I think we've ignored our little gentleman up here for long enough, so let's go in and... Yes, this light over dark with gouache specifically is the Ghibli test. I always want to make sure that it holds its color and its value. It's very difficult to do with gouache, way more difficult than you might think, because gouache, since it dries to a matte finish, if you put something light down, it'll darken, and something dark will lighten, so it can be very difficult to get these contrasty little leaves to show up and not completely turn to mud, basically. But this seems to work okay. Oh, looks like we've got our stretch timer coming up. So let's take a stretch before we paint our little winged friend here. Get up and stretch it out. I would certainly rank it above. The only other real student grade stuff I've ever tried was the, what was the brand? Was it Cotman? It was some kind of watercolor paint that I had gotten at Michael's back when I was first trying to figure out what I liked from paint. I was painting for the first time 5 years ago, and I was just buying a couple of little things here and there, whatever I could sort of afford at the time. And I bought some watercolors that were student grade, and they were so bad. They were criminally bad. I think I might still have the tubes around here somewhere. If I can find them, I will expose them. Because, the worst. I don't think it was Artist Loft. Because that's the Michaels brand. But maybe? Let me see. Oh, you want to see the first paint I ever used, ever? It was these apple barrel toll paints. Because you could get them. Let me get rid of the stretching, guys. Sorry. Stop stretching. Yeah, these apple barrels. I got like a big set of these because they were like 50 cents at the craft store. And I didn't you don't start off knowing what paint is. Unless you go to like art school, I guess they tell you, but I just bought what I saw being paint. And I made some kind of cool stuff with these things. And I still use them, actually. Here's the thing. I still use these for underpaintings. If I'm doing like a gouache piece, I will coat it with these to create some fun colors and effects. Something I should actually start doing in the sketchbook again. I've done it in a few previous sketchbooks. But yeah, I'll show that technique again sometime. I don't see those cheap watercolors in there, but I'll keep digging around. I did find my Crayolas, though. We'll get these out on a stream sometime as well. Got a lot of odds and ends kicking around in the art supply drawer. The apple barrel? Yes. Yeah, they have a nice, well, depending on how you look at it, a plasticky sort of finish. So you can layer stuff on top with water and they will not budge. They just kind of shine through. Now I'm mixing down to my own sort of flavor of dark color. I don't want to dip immediately into black because I want to be able to control the saturation. Even though this is a very, very dark mixture, I want to control the saturation of it. That seems pretty good. Hey, thanks for stopping by, TL. And thank you again for gifting those subs. Oh, dang, we're past the halfway mark for the June follower goal. That's exciting. We're well on our way to giving away some more art. Now for the most challenging part of the whole thing. You ready? There we go. All right. I think that is pretty much going to do it for our demo of the Jelly Gouache. Fascinating stuff. Really. Like, truly, I'm kind of blown away, honestly. Again, for the price, this cost me about $35 Canadian for 18 30 milliliter tubs of gouache. And the colors seem good. Seems pretty bold. We'll see how it looks the next time I open the sketchbook. But I'm kind of into it. I'm going to compare it to the previous painting that I did. So back here, we have the Winsor & Newton gouache that I did the last time I was painting in here. And now the Artex Jelly Gouache. Not bad. Very interesting. Looking forward to trying this out again. Once again, I'm going to be doing this later on once we'll see if the paint's dry. Personally, I'm kind of feeling like putting a bit of maybe wet paper towel, not damp paper towel, but just like barely damp paper towel over top and then covering it with its normal lid. It has a clip lid, but I don't think it doesn't look airtight at all. And we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Well, it's kind of fun, actually, to flip back and forth. But this is the same walk. I took these references the same day. So actually, if you come around this turn along the path and you walk for another like minute or so, this is what you see when you turn to your right, is this tree. And there just happened to be a bird there that day. So it's really nice, especially months and years from now, to look back at these sketchbooks and be like, oh yeah, I remember that day. It was really nice out, and I got to see a bird. I think there's also a picture of a squirrel in my phone, but it's very blurry. But yeah, that's pretty much that. Oh, and we do have a sketch prompt request, which is nice. Hell yes, hell yes. Let me move this to the side. And grab a nice piece of paper. I've drawn on every piece of paper in this office. There we go. We'll do a little zoom in. Now, where did you put my pencil, chat? Did you move my pencil somewhere? Aha, I found it. All right, a hummingbird in a poofy ball gown. I love to hear that. So I need to look up hummingbirds and ball gowns. It's going to be a double Google for this one. I literally Googled the word Google. If anyone is concerned for my brain, now is your time to voice that concern. Ball gown, there we go. It's gonna be poofy. You have been warned. I can't be the only person in the world who's ever Googled the word Google. My phone's gonna snap at me if I keep saying that word. to be so poofy it goes right off the page. There we go, nice and poofy. Do you have Itachi's channel, Lyra? Give them a rate if they're still streaming. I'll make this hummingbird dance while we wait. Boop, boop, doop, bop, beep, 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 bop. Okay. That's all good, as long as I have the name here. Yeah, let's go over and say hi to Itachi. Thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out. Thank you for all the follows today. A lot of folks following today, which is really sweet. Thank you for the subs and the gifted subs. And I will be back on Tuesday. No, Monday. I'll be back on Monday. So come on back if you want to see more painting and general art hangouts. Thank you again, and let's go. Really freak Itachi out.